Hello, in this video we will look at the basal ganglia. So the basal ganglia are present in the brain and ganglia are also present in the peripheral nervous system, but we will discuss about the central nervous system and we will also understand the Parkinson disease or shaking palsy. So in this way here is the brain, which that is we will see coronal section of the brain. And what we see in the coronal section, here we will discuss about these things. So here is the upper part, is the upper layer is known as the gray matter, while inside is the white matter. That is the opposite of the spinal cord, because spinal cord contain inside gray matter. So here is the caudate nucleus body and caudate putamen and caudate nucleus body is the three. It is known as the striatum. So remember about that. And here is the subthalamic nucleus. Why? Because it is below the thalamus. So it is the thalamus, bigger part. And here is the black color is known as the substantia nigra. Nigra means black. So that is why it is originally black. So the globus pallidus and globus pallidus internal and external you can see in this diagram. This globus pallidus and nuclei, which that is play important role also. So here is the person I want to discuss about that. This is the voluntary control for muscle movement. So on the basis of our choice, basically is the not vibration or not muscle muscle tone changes or something. So the movement of the due to the basal ganglia, which that is improve the movement basically. So improvement of the muscle movement and maintain the balance is due to the uh, basal ganglia in the brain. So look like this, basal ganglia are present in the brain, which that is in this type, and this is the thalamus inside, and the smaller loop like structure is known as the tail of caudate nucleus or striate, and striatum is also known as. So here is important thing is that here is the thalamus. So let's here is draw a bigger picture to understand. So this is the bigger picture. In this way, the tail of caudate and nucleus and striatum it is known as, and thalamus is look here gray brown color is showing in the figure, and the putamen nucleus is inside. Putamen is and head of caudate nucleus basically showing in the figure. So in this way here is the striatum and thalamus. In this way, this lead to improve the balance and improve the balance movement basically is not shaking. So that is why it is controlled through a basal ganglia in the brain. So let's here we will discuss first for the getting concept the neuron communication. So first of all we will discuss the neuron communication and we will discuss about the basal ganglia communication next. So here is the neuron, which that is presynaptic neuron, and axon are present, which that is Schwann cell myelinated, and here is the node of Ranvier, and due to the node of Ranvier the saltatory conduction mean the jumping to fast velocity of the nerve impulse. So that is why the myelinated axon containing fast impulse as compared to the unmyelinated nerves. So the presynaptic here and postsynaptic neuron. This neuron is attached via a synapse. Here we will discuss this is the presynaptic neuron. And this after the depolarization, the calcium move inside in the end of the bulb of neuron. And after the calcium stimulate, after the influx of calcium will stimulate the neurotransmitter vesicle to exocytosis and bind with the neurotransmitter receptor, and this is the postsynaptic neuron, which that is contain a neurotransmitter receptor, acetylcholine receptor, dopamine receptor, or glutamate. So this type are GABA. This type is known as the neurotransmitter, which that is give the signal for synapse and electrical conduction to the another neuron to continue the pathway. First order neuron and second order neuron, for example, in the brain cross section you can understand as well. So let's begin to understand. Here is the motor cortex. This motor cortex will control the voluntary muscle movement also. So here is the striatum, and here I am drawing just for understanding. Here is the globus pallidus, internal, and thalamus. And this is the basically the substantia nigra I am drawing here, and here is the subthalamic nucleus, which that is used for the excitation and stop and excitation, both mechanism. And let's begin to understand from thalamus. Thalamus is the central relay part for the muscle movement. How it's possible we will discuss here. Here is the thalamus, which that contain ganglion, which that is transmit the signal to the motor cortex. For muscle movement, it means the glutamate. This glutamate will stimulate while the GABA will inhibit the nerve impulse. So the glutamate will be stimulate the motor cortex. After the motor cortex contain ganglion, and ganglion is the collection of nerves cell. So the motor cortex ganglion will transmit the signal for muscle movement. This is the direct pathway. So the pathway is two type, direct and indirect. But indirect pathway, which that is, it can improve the muscle movement. How? So here is for example, we want to move. It means the indirect pathway, the glutamate will be produced from the motor cortex, and this glutamate will be stimulate the striatum to inhibit the production of GABA, because striatum will produce the GABA, which that is important character is the inhibition. So the inhibition of the globus pallidus will be inhibit, and the globus pallidus can produce the GABA. So it means the GABA is already produced to inhibit, so it means GABA will not produce and not inhibit the thalamus. And in this way, what that means? That means the thalamus will remain active, and it means it is the inhibitory neuron from the striatum to produce GABA to inhibit the globus pallidus for releasing of the GABA to inhibit the thalamus. So thalamus will not inhibit due to the GABA production from the striatum to inhibit the globus pallidus. So here is the substantia nigra, which that is contain a dopamine releasing neuron, which that is interconnect and more reduction of the GABA from the dopamine receptor. So the dopamine receptor to inhibit the production of stimulate dopamine will excite and stimulate the GABA production for more inhibition of the globus pallidus. So in this way the thalamus will be more excited, and in this way here is the subthalamic nucleus, which that is can stop the substantia nigra through GABA, or stimulate from the substantia nigra excite through a glutamate. So in this way, here you can see in this diagram the thalamus will stimulate the motor cortex, and this motor cortex will transmit the signal to the spinal cord down from the pyramidal tract or some other tract, and in this way the motor neuron will be a synapse with the muscle is known as the neuromuscular junction, and this neuromuscular junction will be control the voluntary control of the skeletal muscle. So in this way, I hope you make sense from this diagram. So here is the peripheral nervous system, and here is the central nervous system, and this is the peripheral nervous system is made up of dorsal and ventral root of the nerve fiber is known as the ganglion, dorsal and ventral, while inside the gray matter inside as compared to the brain, because the brain is outside contain a gray matter, while the white matter is the outside in the spinal cord. And here is the pyramidal tract, and here is the motor input, and here is the sensory input. So the motor output basically and sensory input. So in this way, basically the dopamine is produced from the substantia nigra to stimulate more GABA production from the striatum. In this way, important thing is that when dopamine will be increased, so the GABA production will be increased for the globus pallidus internal stimulation. It means the stimulate to inhibit basically after the GABA production to inhibition of the globus pallidus, and it means will not stimulate the production of GABA to inhibit the thalamus. So thalamus will not inhibit by this mechanism, and the thalamus will be excite more and more. So the improvement of the muscle movement will be more. So in this way, the dopaminergic neuron and glutaminergic neuron and GABAminergic neuron, which that is on the basis of production of neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitter is used for the talking to each other, the nerves. So that is why the neurotransmitter is basically stimulation or inhibition. Basically, stimulation or inhibition. So here is the deficiency of dopamine when deficiency of the dopamine basically will uh, will will change the movement of the will not improve the muscle movement. Why? Because the GABA production will be slightly inhibited and more inhibited. So the globus pallidus internal will be slightly stimulate and thalamus will be move unconsciously. So in this way, here is you can see the high risk of disease 50 to 60 years later, older person, and slowly progressive. And here is you can see the Parkinson disease, which that is the head trauma, masked facial expression, and stooped posture and rigidity. And this tremor, basically it is we can remember with the trap. Trap means the tremor, shaking, rigidity, stiffness of the limb, neck, or trunk, and other things that is the uh, uh, loss of power of voluntary muscle, so the akinesia and the posture balance. So in this way you can remember with the sign and symptom with trap, you can understand with trap. So here is the we can also treatment, we can also treat and recover, but the slightly not completely. So the effective drug is the L-dopa, which can be improve the Parkinson disease recovery, and naturally occurring protein called glial cell line and derived neurotrophic factor GDNF has been shown to boost uptake of dopamine and smoking basically as well as the exercise. So the nicotine is important for the neurotransmitter stimulation, so the production of dopamine. So in this way, I hope you make sense about the dopamine producing substantia nigra will be inhibit because the dopamine will not produce enough. So that means the motor cortex will not work too much because the thalamus will be stimulated.